Uncover sinister secrets, spine-chilling true tales of the haunted revealed in the rain. Sarah's world spun on a wheel of grease and sweet coffee in the diner, but that reality cracked one eerie night when an unearthly thud echoed from the front door. She dropped the soggy dish towel, heart racing, pulse thundering in her ears. Alex and Emma paused mid-laughter, their soft faces sharpening with confusion and fear. Who could be out there? "Mom?" Alex whispered, his voice quivering like the flimsy curtains swaying in the wind. She forced a smile, but it felt like a mask over the growing dread swelling in her chest. As the rain drummed on the roof, a chilling chill seeped into the air. It wasn't just the weather, it was the unmistakable presence of something sinister lurking outside. The thumping grew louder, echoing deeply, like a heartbeat vibrating through the very bones of their home. And then there was silence, the kind of silence that made the world feel upside down, inappropriate. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, wishing away the unease that coated her skin like a cold sweat. The storm wasn't just a weather phenomenon. It was a cocoon of darkness wrapping tightly around Willow Creek, twisting its gentle facade into something grotesque. Her thoughts raced as she opened the door to find a scrap of paper folded neatly on the porch. "The storm is coming," it read in sharp, unsteady letters, bringing her pulse to a screeching halt. She hesitated, glancing back at her children, who now sat listening intently to the rain's cadence, blissfully unaware of the terror scratching at their doorstep. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue." The rain poured heavier, masking any sound of her footsteps as she ventured out further. Each drop felt like a whisper taunting her. Officer Marlowe, the once friendly face of the law, was now a specter haunting her memories, always watching, always lurking in the shadows. His smile, once reassuring, now felt sinister. Why was he standing outside her home, shrouded in the cloak of night? She spotted him in the distance, but he seemed to melt away the moment she took a step toward him. Each passing hour morphed into a labyrinth of anxiety. The edge of sanity frayed. With each whispered tale shared among her diners, older women with tired eyes warning her of dark folklore, of a child that vanished into the storm. Her stomach twisted at the thought, realizing that even the whispers from coworkers played on her fears. What if the storm they spoke of was more than just rain? The thumping returned, more insistent this time. It wasn't just a noise anymore. It grew into a message that clawed at her mind. Terrified, she clutched Emma and Alex, and the door creaked open, inch by inch, revealing a scatter of fresh notes, more cryptic than before. One crude drawing stood out, of her children, faces twisted with horror, eyes wide like the moonlit sky above. As the lightning flickered, illuminating the night, that single horrifying realization crashed down on her. Protectors had become predators. The storm was coming, and Sarah was left powerless against the oncoming tide of darkness. Would she and her family escape the horrors this town had buried? The ground trembled under Sarah's feet as the thunder rolled ominously overhead. The notes felt heavy in her hands, their strange messages and disturbing illustrations pulling her into a dark well of dread. She quickly slammed the door shut, locking out the damned storm and the whispers circling her mind. "Mom, what was that?" Emma's voice quivered, her little fingers wrapped tightly around Sarah's arm. Alex clung to her waist, eyes wide with fear, drawing closer as if merging into one. The resemblance between their frightened faces sent a wave of protective instinct crashing over Sarah. "It's nothing, just the storm," she managed to say, but the lie tasted bitter on her tongue. The pounding in her chest echoed the relentless thumping at the door. Just as she turned to rally her children, the lights flickered, plunging them into darkness. Panic surged, creeping fingers of ice up her spine as the power sputtered out completely. "Stay close," she urged, the sound of her own voice sounding far too shaky to be authoritative. They shuffled back, pressing against the kitchen corner, the familiar warmth of home slipping through their fingers like sand. Then there was a knock, sharp and deliberate, at the back door. It sent shivers of ice racing down her spine. A different rhythm, this thud seemed to echo with intent. "Mom?" Alex whimpered. "Keep quiet," she whispered fiercely, cutting the air with urgency. Heart thumping louder than thunder, Sarah crept toward the door, inching her way around the kitchen island. The shadows flickered dangerously, stretching grotesquely as she moved. She dared a glance at the back door, fear clawing at her throat. The rain slammed against the window, grief-stricken droplets racing each other down the glass. She peered closer and saw him. Not Officer Marlowe, but someone else, someone cloaked in darkness, their face a mere whisper against the black night. Panic surged in her chest. Who was this? Why were they here? The person pounded again, sending a jolt through her entire body. The door rattled with urgency and despair, but something in Sarah urged her not to open it. "I can't," she breathed, her mind racing back through the tales of lost children swirling in her memory. As stories of vanished souls danced on the periphery of her thoughts, she recoiled slightly, a chill shooting through her limbs. The pounding stopped. Silence enveloped her, a predatory pause. Then a voice sliced the air, a whisper so soft and chilling it felt like a caress. "Sarah, let me in." Her heart fought against the grip of fear, hammering wildly. It was too familiar, tinged with a haunting echo of something long buried. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered back, fear lacing her words. "Please, I'm coming in. The storm, it knows." The voice filled the kitchen, an eerie blend of pleading and something darker lurking beneath. Terror struck her like a thunderclap. The storm wasn't just a threat, it was alive. She turned on her heel, pushing her children lower in the corner, keeping her own heart from betraying her fear. "I won't let you take them," she screamed into the darkness, emotion spilling over her resolve. A low chuckle came from beyond the door, deep and resonant, shaking her core. The voice transformed into something grotesque, echoing with madness. "You can't stop what's coming. Light or dark, we'll find you." The last crack of thunder broke through the tension, rattling the windows, and she sank to the floor with her children, mind racing. She couldn't understand how terror could manifest, seep into the cracks of her home. But then, a haunting realization slipped in as she held Emma and Alex tighter. The storm had blurred the lines, but could she protect them from what she couldn't see? Then the lights flickered back on briefly, and for a fleeting second she glimpsed a shadow behind her, dark and elongated, creeping just beyond the door. That shadow was no longer just a part of the storm. Something cold settled in her stomach, knotting itself tightly. As the storm raged on, an unwelcoming truth washed over her. She wasn't just battling the elements outside. Her home had become a cage, a twisted arena with her children as unwilling players. Would she stand strong enough against the tide of evil creeping in, or would the storm swallow them whole? The tension hung heavy in the air, and for a moment that seemed to stretch eternally, no one moved. But then Sarah heard a soft scratching sound at the window. Her heart dropped as her eyes darted toward the noise. Who or what was there waiting to join the storm? The scratching continued, a quiet, methodical rhythm that clawed at Sarah's nerves. Each scrape sent jolts of ice down her spine. She barely dared to breathe, waiting for a sign, for anything that would clarify the terror thrumming through her veins. "Mom, what's happening?" Emma's voice trembled next to her, tiny and full of fear that mirrored Sarah's own. "Shh," Sarah hissed, as if sound alone could shield them. She gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, knuckles white under the pressure. Panic swelled within her like water threatening to breach a dam. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, and she fought the urge to turn and look. Then a new sound rippled through the air, a faint whisper carried on the wind. It wrapped around her ears, delicate but deafening in its intimacy. "Sarah, you need to let me in. It's already too late." Her breath hitched, caught somewhere in her throat. How could this voice speak with such calm amidst the chaos? If she didn't know better, she might think it was an old friend. But she did know better. The storm didn't just influence what was outside. It had a way of bringing in memories, regrets. The scratching escalated, evolving into a rhythmic tapping, urgent like a heartbeat. She dared a glance at the window and felt sickness wash over her. A pale hand splattered against the glass, fingers splayed wide, pressing slowly, insistently. The figure behind was barely discernible, swallowed by shadows, mouth moving but words lost to the raging storm. "Get away!" she shouted, face prickling with fear. She couldn't take it anymore. The darkness was closing in from all sides, and she had to protect her children. Nothing else mattered. But the storm intensified, the wind howling in fury. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the figure just enough for her to see. The face, gaunt, twisted, sent her heart racing. It was a visage she could barely recognize, but one that loomed in her memory, a ghost from her past. "Mom, who is that?" whispered Alex, clutching tighter to her waist, as if she could be their shield against the world crashing around them. "Someone from far away." "Do you know them?" Her throat felt thick. "No." The lie hung heavy in the air. It felt like a betrayal. "Please, Sarah, it's me," the figure called out again, voice thick with desperation. "You have to believe me." Each word dripped with something sinister that made the chill in the air feel more potent. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, illuminating the kitchen in harsh bursts. Each flicker was like a heartbeat, a reminder of the dire situation pressing down on her. For a fleeting instant, the shadow grew stronger, a tall and bending silhouette that leered down at them before plunging back into oblivion with the next blackout. "What is happening?" Sarah exclaimed, her voice cracking under the weight of confusion and terror. Just then, there was a loud crash from somewhere deep inside the house, a sound like furniture being toppled over or glass shattering. Sarah's heart skidded to a halt. "Stay here," she ordered, but fear for her children clawed at her like a wild animal. She knew that leaving them could mean risking everything, but she needed to know what was happening. She needed to confront whatever presence lurked within the walls of their home. As she stepped away from the kitchen with reluctant dread, the whispers grew louder, enveloping her like a fog. "You're not alone, Sarah," they echoed, taunting, pulling her closer to the unknown. Just as she prepared to move further into the house, the door swung open with a violent thrust, caught completely off guard. Rain lashed inside, cold and unyielding, bringing with it a chill that penetrated deep. She spun around, heart thundering. Was it the storm that had pushed the door open, or something worse? Frozen in place, she felt two small hands grip her leg, Emma and Alex. Their eyes were wide, reflecting the fear that churned within the room. "Stay together!" Sarah shouted, but terror stole the power from her voice. The wind howled, laughter intertwined with the rain, and she fought a gnawing sense of despair. The storm was rising, and now it preyed not just on the outside, but inside her very home. As the shadows drew closer, she had to wonder, what had she invited in, and was there still hope to escape? The air thickened with dread as Sarah stood frozen, torn between the pulsing terror from beyond the door and the pitter-patter of rain blending with the whispers dancing around her. Her heart was a wild drum, barely contained within her chest. "Mom!" Emma's voice was shrill, cutting through the storm's cacophony. "What do we do? I don't like this!" "I'm trying, honey, I'm trying," she managed, fighting the rising tide of panic. The shadows around them felt alive, pressing in from all sides, each whisper blurring the edges of her sanity. Outside, the wind howled with a ferocity that seemed almost sentient. The door swung open wider, revealing a dark abyss where the porch once stood. Another crash from inside the house sent her spinning back. "I need to see," she murmured, the words barely escaping her lips. "Please don't leave us." Alex clung to her like a lifeline, his small hands trembling against her waist. Sarah knew she had no choice. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but she couldn't leave them alone. "All right, stay close," Sarah commanded, her voice sharpened with resolve. They shuffled toward the living room, the darkness crackling like electricity around them. Each step felt heavier, as if the air itself conspired against her. As they entered the living room, she felt a breath of cool air swirl around her, unsettling. The furniture was in disarray, toppled as if a tempest had raged through the heart of her home. Shadows danced in the corners, flickering like reflections from another reality. And the whispers, oh, the whispers, it felt like they were coming from within the walls. "Sarah, Sarah." The haunting tone twisted her name, echoing in her mind. "Who is it?" she screamed, losing control. "Sarah, you can't hide." It was the figure from the window, now lurking in her thoughts, seeping into her very soul. With each heartbeat, it drew closer. Then, in the corner of her eye, she saw it. There was movement, a shadow flitting past the edge of the hallway. Frozen, she felt a rush of adrenaline. "Did you see that?" she whispered to the children, her voice a trembling whisper.
Barely above the storm's rage. "What, Mom?" Emma's voice was small, barely audible above the roaring wind. "I don't know, but we need to go back." Sarah spun around, realizing the door was closed, the entrance blocked from her view. Panic clawed up her throat. "Let's go!" she shouted, grabbing their hands. But as they turned, the hallway seemed to stretch infinitely ahead, dark and malevolent. Another crash. It felt right behind them now, a shuddering presence closing in. "Sarah!" The voice now sounded more urgent, the whispers building to a crescendo. They felt suffocating, a clamoring urgency to be heard. She turned back, but there was no room to flee. The darkness thickened, swallowing every light, every shred of hope. "Mom!" Alex cried out, his small body shaking like a leaf in the wind. "Hold on tight," she urged, pulling them against her. But the air pulsated, almost alive, thick with malevolence. Just as she felt the shadows closing in, the lights flickered back to life, and there it was, a figure at the end of the hallway, grotesque and twisted, mirroring the pain that now echoed within the confines of her soul. "Let me show you," it said, the voice deceptive, laced with mockery. In that moment, terror crystallized in her veins. She grabbed the children, heart racing. "Run!" she screamed, as the walls seemed to echo her panic, vibrating with the weight of unspeakable horrors. But as they bolted towards the door, it slammed shut, sealing their fate. They spun around to face the darkness, the figure advancing slowly, malicious intent radiating from its hollow gaze. "Mom, it knows you!" Emma shrieked. "What does it want?" Alex whimpered, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Everything," it hissed, a sinister wind spiraling around them, pushing them back. Sarah felt the floor tremble beneath their feet, the house itself growling as if alive. Just as the figure reached out, a loud clap of thunder filled the house, and darkness enveloped them once more. The last thing she heard was a single, deliberate whisper. "You shouldn't have let me in." And then there was silence, a silence that swallowed all hope. Where could they hide now? What other horrors awaited them in the suffocating gloom? The fear gnawed at her, unrelenting. As shadows writhed, perhaps she had made choices that would haunt her forever. The silence shattered like glass, the ominous whispers churning in the empty air. Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps. She strained to hear anything beyond the heartbeat thundering in her ears. "Mom, I can't see," Emma cried, her panic rising. It's okay, Sarah whispered, but it felt anything but okay. They were engulfed in darkness, gripping each other so tightly that her fingers ached. "Can't we go out the window?" Alex suggested, voice trembling. "We can't leave like this. Not yet." She forced the words through her fear, praying for some sign, some way forward. The shadows loomed, shifting shapes flickering in her peripheral vision. It was...
"Where is it?" Emma whimpered, her voice small and fragile. "Stay close. Just stay close," Sarah repeated, trying to anchor herself. But the darkness seemed to breathe, heavy, pulsing, a predator circling its prey. Just then, a low, rumbling growl echoed from the depths. The temperature dropped sharply. A cold hand gripped Sarah's heart. "Run!" she shouted, instinct taking over as the clawing chill scraped at her skin. The three of them dashed through the shadows, arms reaching out for anything solid. They stumbled over furniture, their feet tangling in the chaos, desperation a burning fire within them. "Mom, it's coming!" Alex squealed, his eyes wide with terror. "Keep moving," she cried, her mind racing. She could feel it behind them, the figure lurking just out of sight, feeding off their fear. Every shadow felt like a hand reaching out, ready to pull them back into the void. Sarah's heart thundered louder as they neared the window at the far end of the room. The rain lashed violently against it, a desperate symphony matching her racing pulse. "Open it!" Emma yelled, her small fingers fumbling with the stuck latch. Come on," Sarah urged, glancing over her shoulder. The figure was closer now, the air thick with its malice. No longer an illusion of darkness, it was real, and it was coming for them. Then, with a sudden clang, the latch snapped. Emma pushed the window open, rain pouring in, momentarily illuminating the room with chaotic flashes of lightning. "Go!" Sarah shoved her children through. She could feel the shadows crawling on her skin, dragging her back with an icy grip. With a final glance, she launched herself out the window, landing hard on the ground below. They scrambled to their feet, drenched and gasping for breath. But as Sarah turned to lead her kids away, she felt the unmistakable chill settle on her shoulders. A presence loomed behind her, solid and oppressive. "Mom," Emma quivered, stepping closer. "It's okay. Keep moving," Sarah urged, but even as she spoke, a bone-deep dread twisted in her gut. The figure stood in the window, silhouetted against the stormy sky. "Did you think you could escape?" it called, voice 1,000 echoes warped into one. The rage was palpable, a tidal wave ready to crash down upon them. They bolted away from the house, sprinting into the woods that enveloped their home. Shadows clung to the trees, whispering their names, drowning them in fear. "Where are we going?" Alex cried, glancing back nervously. "Anywhere but here," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. But as they plunged deeper into the thicket, she could feel the whispers intensifying, rising like the tide, drawing close. Something was lurking, waiting for them to falter. Branches clawed at their limbs as they plunged forward, nature itself becoming a sinister accomplice. Then, just ahead, they stumbled upon an old stone path, overgrown but distinct. "Maybe we can hide there." Sarah pointed, another voice inside her warning of the unknown. But what lay at the end of the path? More whispers? More shadows? "Mom, do you think it can follow us out here?" Emma asked, eyes filled with dread. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, heart racing. The wind howled once more, almost as if answering. But something tugged at her, an insistent pull, forcing her feet forward, as if the very words were weeding a trap into which she was being led. Desperation rising, they pressed on, unaware of the eyes watching from the dark, unseen but very present, ready to make their move. What lay ahead? Would safety bring relief or another horror? The path wound deeper into the woods, a dim trail barely visible even under the sporadic flashes of lightning. The air was thick with damp leaves and the sharp scent of pine, but the familiar smells were tainted with something far more sinister. Whispers floated around them, wrapping around their limbs like cold tendrils, making it hard to breathe. "Mom, please, can we stop?" Alex's voice trembled, fear lacing his every word. "No, we need to keep moving," Sarah snapped, her own heart hammering ferociously as panic mixed with her protective instincts. They had to find safety, whatever that meant now. With every step, the woods grew darker, the trees closing in, twisting into sinister shapes. The shadows didn't just stretch, they lurked and crept, spinning tales of nightmares in their movements. Overhead, a crack of thunder split the sky like a skull, loud, unsettling. "Look!" Emma pointed ahead, her finger trembling slightly. A small clearing opened up before them, the darkness lifting, revealing an old structure of damped stone and wood, vines encroaching around its edges. "It's abandoned," Sarah murmured, squinting into the gloom of the clearing. But even in her fear, a sliver of hope pierced her thoughts. "Maybe we can hide in there." They approached cautiously, the rain hammering down in sheets now, drumming against the ground. As they neared the building, dread seeped back in. The door hung half off its hinges, creaking like a broken promise. "Mom, what if it's safe?" Alex whispered, pulling back slightly. "Safe is better than out here," Sarah insisted, her voice steadier than she felt. They dashed inside, water dripping from the overhang into the dirt-strewn floor, darkness enveloping them once again. The musty air was suffocating, and shadows danced along the walls, cast by the dim light filtering through cracks. "Mom, I don't like this place," Emma whimpered, her small hands shaking. "Just a moment," Sarah said, scanning the room. The last rays of lightning illuminated a dilapidated fireplace. It felt like a warning, the remnants of warmth long extinguished, leaving only fear behind. Suddenly, the woods outside erupted in a cacophony of howling wind and rustling leaves, masking the telltale sound of footsteps. Sarah's heart stopped. She listened harder, the quiet thrum of her children's breaths amplifying the growing tension. "Did you hear that?" Alex asked. Eyes wide. "It's just the wind, I think." But she was already moving, backing away from the door. The heavy feeling of dread weighed down on her, as if something was pressing against her chest. Then, behind them, a low growl rumbled within the shadows, and her blood froze. It came from deeper inside the structure, echoing like a distant animal ready to pounce. The whispers heightened, a dissonant chorus that promised pain. "Mom!" Emma cried, as Sarah turned to face her kids, and her movement jostled something in the corner of her vision. Dark, snake-like figures slithering just out of reach, watching, waiting. "Stay close!" she shouted, gripping both of their hands as the growling came closer. In that moment, the door slammed shut, rattling the thin frame and drowning them in darkness. The world outside was suddenly muted, the raging storm just a distant memory. "What's happening?" Alex's voice cracked, tugging at Sarah's resolve. "Shh!" She held her finger to her lips, every instinct screaming at her to remain silent. The shadows moved again, circling closer, drawn to their fear. They felt the weight of cold, clammy air wrapping around them like fingers, squeezing ever tighter. The whispers became a chant, seeping into Sarah's mind, a mix of her own thoughts and something darker, something that seemed to know her. "Leave, leave, leave," it hissed, a taunting directive. Desperation clawed at her throat. "We can't just sit here." "Where do we go?" Emma's voice was a fragile cry. But Sarah didn't know. How could she? The walls seemed to close in as the shadows offered no answers, only questions, a morbid labyrinth spinning around them with a trap laid at every corner. Just then, an unnaturally bright flicker sparked from the fireplace. The shadows recoiled, smothered by the light, yet they still coiled in anticipation. What was hidden in this forsaken place? Would the truth chase them further into darkness? Every second felt like a lifetime, and they had already waited too long. Sarah's heart spoke a single truth. This was just beginning. The flicker from the fireplace cast an eerie glow, illuminating the corners of the dank room. Shadows retreated, but they were not gone. They loomed ever closer, shifting like dark smoke, waiting for the light to fade again. Sarah could almost feel their hunger, palpable and near. "Stay here," she instructed, though her voice shook. She let go of Emma and Alex's hands, forcing herself to step toward the fireplace. The faint hope of warmth beckoned her. Perhaps the fire could ward off the growing darkness. But it felt like a trap, a false sense of security luring her deeper into peril. As Sarah knelt, focusing on the sputtering embers, the weight of their breathing filled the room. Each breath reverberated, drowned out by the growling now spiraling rapidly, morphing into a jagged symphony of fear laid over her children's whimpers. She used her trembling hands to gather wood, splintered pieces that seemed to moan when touched. "Mom!" Alex hissed,
eyes darting. "Don't leave us!" "It's okay, babe," she tried to assure him, though the knot in her stomach twisted tighter. The shadows shifted again, blurring boundaries. They whispered louder, strings of unintelligible words wrapping around her mind as the darkness grew bold, seeping past her defenses. "I can't do this," Emma's voice trembled, high-pitched and broken, urging tears to collect at the corners of her eyes. "Mom!" Alex cried again, the panic in his tone turning from urgency to outright terror. She felt a surge of anger and fear. "Quiet!" she hissed, but it felt like a futile grasp against the rising tide of despair. "No!" She forced her mind to focus. They were still together. They had to fight. In a surge of adrenaline, she struck a match against the old stone, and for a heartbeat, the flames sparked brightly, illuminating not just her surroundings, but revealing a sense of urgency behind her. From the dimness poured shadowy figures, twisting, stretching, reaching for them in an attempt to breach their fragile barricade of light. "Look!" Alex shouted, pointing behind Sarah, terror etched across his face. The shadows clawed at the edges of her vision, and with a jolt she twisted around to discover elongated, distorted figures forming in the corners. Limbs out of place and eyes glimmering with malevolent intent.
They were nothing human, shifting like smoke, yet solid, waiting for the flicker to fade. "Mom!" Emma's eyes were wide, pleading. The shadows lunged. Sarah turned, clutching Emma and Alex tightly against her. "We have to go!" The half-door lay just a few feet away, flapping weakly in rhythm to the howl of wind. Each moment stretched like eternity. Uncertainty clawed at her throat. She couldn't go back into that darkness. Gathering every shred of courage, she sprinted toward the door. As they reached it, the room erupted with frenetic whispers, calling her name, begging her to turn around. "Sarah, come back! Stay, stay!" Before she could grasp the door handle, the frigid tendrils of shadow whipped through the air, wrapping around her wrists like the cold embrace of death. It was a warning, raw panic filaments cutting through her as they squeezed. "No!" she screamed, trying to shake them off. The children's cries mixed with the shrieks of the shadows, a chorus of despair, echoing in a terrifying harmony that seemed to burrow into Sarah's mind, relaying their intent. She shoved against the door, pulling hard, until the cold grasp slipped just enough for her to yank it open. Fresh rain pelted her face, bursting in a chaotic torrent. She charged into the night, dragging her children with her, hearts pounding with the rhythm of survival. But the shadows didn't retaliate just yet. Instead, the door slammed shut behind them with a finality that sounded like a death knell. Outside, the storm raged, but their flight had hardly begun. "Where do we go now?" Alex gasped, the world around them closing in. "I don't know," Sarah panted, and that brutal unknown pressed down on her like lead. They were back outside, exposed, vulnerable, the forest alive with menace once again. A whisper flickered through the rain, soft but sharp. "You can't escape." Panic surged in waves, but the shadows remained veiled, waiting to reclaim their lost prize. Would they find another refuge, or had they unleashed something darker into the world, waiting just beyond the threshold? The rain fell like daggers, soaking through Sarah's clothes, and she shivered, not just from the cold, but from the loss of the last vestiges of safety. Glancing around, the dark forest closed in. Trees morphed into twisted sentinels, branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. Emma's small form trembled beside her, and Alex leaned into her, wide-eyed and gasping. "Mom, what's happening?" he whimpered, confusion mixing with terror. "I don't know, Alex. We need to keep moving," Sarah urged, clenching her jaw to suppress the fear threading through her. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the cacophony of rain enveloped them, heavy and oppressive. The whispers returned, swirling around them, taunting her with each step. "Stay, stay, you will never leave." It was maddening, the sense that there were eyes watching, lurking in the shadows. Suddenly, a chilling howl echoed through the trees, freezing Sarah in her tracks. It was not an animal. It was too human, filled with despair and longing. A frightened gasp escaped Emma's lips, and Alex instinctively clutched his sister. "Mom, please," Emma begged, and for a moment the world around them shifted. The trees seemed to lean closer, as if they were eager listeners to the horror brewing in the cold air. "Shh, we need to find shelter," Sarah whispered, her heart racing as she scanned the darkened path ahead. In the distance, a pale light flickered through the dense trunks of the trees. "Look!" Alex pointed, voice trembling. The light grew, flickering softly like a beacon. Sarah hesitated for a heartbeat, then started walking again, guided by a flicker of hope. "What if it's a trap?" Emma murmured, her fear palpable. "We can't stay out here," Sarah insisted, her own voice shaky. With each step toward the light, the shadows behind them writhed, as if enraged by their detachment. The whispers escalated into frantic cries, stirring the unease spiraling in Sarah's chest. "Turn back. Come home."
Shaking with cold and terror, they continued forward. As they approached, she realized it was a dilapidated cabin, leaning ominously against the trees. Cracks in the wood revealed nothing but darkness, but the subtle glow beckoned her inside. "Mom, what if they're in there?" Alex asked, eyes darting nervously. "We'll take the chance," Sarah said, resolve hardening within her. She reached for the door, prodding it lightly. It creaked open in protest, revealing darkness lined with the faintest shimmer of light. Inside, the air musty and stale.
Them like a brick wall. As they stepped through the threshold, the door groaned ominously behind them, slamming shut, a deliberate act of its own. The light pulsed from the far corner, a flickering lantern dimly illuminating the horrific scene. Old newspapers littered the floor, scripts of tragedy and misfortune overlapping ominously. Articles detailing disappearances and strange happenings in these woods. Echoes of fears etched on yellowed pages. Sarah's heart plummeted. "Mom," Emma whispered, the wavering light casting ghostly shadows on their faces. "We should go," Alex urged, eyes darting to the corners. But Sarah stood frozen. The weight of the shadows closing outside was palpable, burdened her. And yet, here in the cabin, lay a sinister pull. She moved closer to the lantern, heart pounding, and her gaze fell on a hastily scrawled note pinned on the creaking wall. The words haunted her. "They come when called. They crave the lost." A shudder ran through her, and the whispers outside seemed to swell, a growing tide demanding entrance. "Stay, stay," their chorus invited dread. Around her, the shadows shrank and elongated, warping the familiar into the grotesque. The air thickened. Had they truly escaped? Had she led her children into a deeper nightmare? The door rattled, shadows still lurking beyond. With a mind still swirling in confusion and terror, Sarah faced her children. "What do we do now?" And then came the echo of a laugh, a chilling, knowing laugh from outside. Something craved them. The ground felt unstable beneath her as she braced for whatever would come next. But just before collapse, the lantern flickered and dimmed, casting the room back into shadow. And something whispered, deep and hungry, "Join us." What lay hidden behind the door? Would they face whatever was waiting beyond? Or would they dissolve into the encroaching darkness? The lantern's flicker stuttered, plunging the cabin into a darkness that felt alive. Sarah's breathing quickened as she leaned closer to her children, her heart pounding against her ribcage like a trapped animal. The walls seemed to press in, their splintered wood vibrating with eyes that were not supposed to be there, whispering sins and despair that crept into her bones. "Mom, we need to get out," Emma urged again, her voice high and quavering, a note of panic threading through each syllable. But Sarah's feet were rooted, fascinated and horrified by the note's sinister message. They come when called. They crave the lost. What did that mean? Had they stumbled upon something dark, something waiting to be unleashed? The laughter outside swirled around them like a phantom wind. It was mocking, knowing. Shadows danced through the cracks of the cabin, teasing the edges of sanity. "Join us," echoed ever louder, an invitation wrapped in treachery. "Stay close," Sarah hissed, wrapping her arms around her children, pulling them into the small, tattered embrace of a mother fighting against evil. She scanned the cabin, searching for an escape, but the windows had turned to opaque mirrors, reflecting only their terror.
Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching through the wet leaves. It was not just the rain that fell outside. Something was coming for them, and time was not on their side. "Mom, look!" Alex pointed to a corner of the room illuminated by the dying lantern. A trapdoor. It was ajar, a dark mouth beckoning them to plunge into the unknown. "I don't know what's down there," Sarah whispered, glancing nervously at her children. Emma quivered, but Alex's eyes shone with something between curiosity and fear, as if he could already sense whatever lay beneath the floor. "We have to," he urged, the sound firm but edged with anxiety. "It could lead us out." "Do we trust it?" Emma trembled, clinging tighter to Sarah. The bond of siblings had never felt so fragile, so precarious in the face of the unknown. "Maybe that's what they want us to do. Maybe it's a trap," she murmured, feeling the weight of every word. She could hear the murmurings outside growing louder. Shadows massed at the windows, stretching inward, desperate to know what the family would decide. But what other choice do we have? With a fragile steadiness, Sarah guided her children to the trapdoor. She knelt down, the wood creaking beneath her, sending the sound echoing through the cabin, a loud thud of inevitability. "Hold on tight, we go together," she whispered, unsure if she was trying to reassure them or herself. But just before they could reach the darkness below, the door slammed wide open, the howling wind replacing the whispers, a rush of icy air that cut through the dampness of the cabin like a knife. A silhouette loomed there at the threshold, eyes glinting with a hunger that chilled Sarah to her bones. What are you?" Sarah's voice trembled, a mix of fear and defiance. "It does not matter what I am, dear Sarah," the figure purred, voice smooth yet razor-edged. "What matters is what you will offer, what you will become." With a sickening lurch in her stomach, Sarah understood. The shadows beyond were not just calling her, they were demanding her. The price of escape weighed heavy, and the specter advanced with a hunger that could devour the light of hope entirely. "Mom!" the children cried, as that terrible laugh echoed once more, drawing closer. The light faded. In the pitch blackness, as pure terror wrapped around them, all Sarah could do was scream. Could they escape the grasp of the darkness, or was it already too late? The grip of darkness tightened around Sarah and her children, an insidious force that tangled with their breaths and shadows. A cacophony of despair weighed heavily on Sarah's heart. She could feel the dread pulling her down, luring her with the chill of hopelessness. "Mom, we need to go!" yelled Emma, her voice filled with terror, as the figure in the doorway laughed again, disturbing the air like a sharp knife. It was a laugh that echoed with tales of loss and despair, a cruel reminder of what they'd been running from. "Not yet!" Sarah cried, determination flaring within her. They had faced terror before, and leaving now could mean losing everything. Gathering her courage, she turned to the children. "We can't cower in fear. We need to fight back." "But how?" Alex whimpered, his wide eyes searching hers for a sign of safety. Her heart raced. The trapdoor beckoned behind them, whispering possibilities, begging for courage. The storm wasn't just outside. This darkness is ours to confront. But the figure stepped further in, a dark wave of intent whirling around it. To fight is to lose. Surrender to the shadows, and all your fears will be gone. "No!" Sarah shouted, the weight of her voice piercing through the veil of fright. "I will not let you take them." In that moment, she and her children were bound by a single thread of resolve. The shadows slithered closer, fingers twisting like vines stretching towards her. But within the pit of her mind, a single thought ignited, a memory of warmth and love shared, moments of laughter that overshadowed fear. "Together!" she cried, and yanked Emma and Alex closer. Suddenly, the lantern flared back to life, illuminating the fading darkness. The shadows quivered, rattled by the light. "You shouldn't have disturbed us," the figure hissed, momentarily revealing its twisted face, a reflection of their own fears, the embodiment of doubt and past regrets. "Whatever you are, you cannot have us," Sarah shouted, unleashing every ounce of her defiance. Moving as one, they plunged below the trapdoor, into the claustrophobic darkness that awaited them. Shivers ran down Sarah's spine, but she propelled herself forward, her instinct leading the way. The air grew dense, but she sensed movement, the shadows burning with resentment but held back by the light tethered to their resolve. "It's a way out," she whispered fiercely, urging her children to keep moving forward. Suddenly, a deafening crash resonated from above. They stumbled forward, propelled by panic as they emerged into a narrow tunnel lined with rough stones. The whispers intensified, swirling around them like a tempest. "You will never escape," they shrieked, echoing relentlessly. "But we already are escaping," Sarah shouted back, her voice firm yet trembling, igniting a flicker of hope within herself. As they crawled further, the light grew, guiding them toward an opening. The storm still raged outside, echoing in the distance, but the paths beyond the darkness were close. "Just a bit more," she urged, and they emerged into a clearing, the night illuminated by the wild blasts of lightning around them. But the figure from the cabin was still looming, dark in the shadows beyond the threshold. The shadows chased them, yearning for their fear. "Mom!" Emma shouted, her voice small against the eerie storm. "Trust me," Sarah urged, turning to her children, shaking hands.